This is a lynch mob of hundreds of anti-Israeli protesters in search of Jewish passengers who were expected to arrive from Israel. This lynch mob stormed the Mahachkala airport in Russian Republic of Dagestan soon after a plane from Israel just arrived. They're shouting anti-Semitic slogans, some even chanting Allahu Akbar. Listen in. Protesters were seen waving the Palestinian flags, breaking down glass doors and running through the airport shouting Allahu Akbar. Now, the unrest marks a worrying situation for not just Israelis but Jews all across the globe, especially after the war against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel stepped up airstrikes close to Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City after ordering its immediate evacuation. Also, raids were conducted just 50 meters from the facility. Head of World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has called it a deeply concerning situation. The Israeli military has expanded ground operations in Gaza amid a communications blackout in the territory ever since Friday. Explosions continue to light up Gazan sky as the Israeli forces showered the besieged Palestinian territory with bombs and missiles. Communications and internet services have also been temporarily shut down and cut off as well. After some time, communications in Gaza were restored gradually. Russia, interestingly, has said, or rather blamed, Ukraine and the West for the anti-Israeli supporters taking over the airport in Dagestan. For more details in terms of where the situation is headed forward in a deeply divided geopolitical climate, let me also bring in my guest today. I'm joined in by Adam Scott Bellos, who's the CEO of Israel Innovation Fund and is also a political commentator. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining in here on News 18 Global. Now, this kind of a violent mob going on a rampage looking for Israelis and Jews chanting anti-Semitic slogans. What does it speak of the failure of Russian law enforcement authorities?
Of course it does. And not only that, a question has to be raised. What is Russia doing? Whose side are they on? Why are they playing both sides right now? What goal does China and Russia have making the alliance they have to undermine the United States in this process? Because if China and Russia are going to be siding with Iran and radical Islamists, when both China and Russia have very strict laws when it comes to Islamism and completely disagree ideologically with Islamism, what are they doing right now? Why are they playing both sides of the aisle? What does it say about Russia not being able to control this and not bringing in the army or their security forces right away to quell this situation? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked about what are Russia's intentions right now? How are they going to protect their own country from an Islamist invasion, if that makes sense?
Right.
If this is the type of behavior that is able to occur in an airport.
Absolutely. Is this incident also an indication of the unbridled incitement being directed towards Jews and Israelis and the deep divide of the geopolitical climate, which we can already see now in the way Russia has reacted?
The war is an excuse. The war is an excuse. Every conflict that happens between Israel and some type of entity, okay, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, the PA, Fatah, okay, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Anytime we get into a skirmish of any kind, these are the things that happen, okay? What has happened differently this time is the veracity and the barbarity that has been seen because of October 7th. There are new reports coming out that they somebody has finally shared testimony about taking a dead baby out of an oven that they cooked. Okay, what has happened because of this? And if you've noticed, any of the pro-Palestinian representatives are using the talking points of the last 20 years to explain everything, trying to ignore what happened on October 7th, because for years, they've been saying, we're not anti-Semitic, we're anti-Zionist. This is about the occupation. This is about the political situation. But clearly, that has been a lie. Clearly, okay, the excuses and the apologists for these radical Islamic cells, okay, now have no ability to twist, turn, and spin the situation anymore, which has put the entire pro-Palestinian community on edge, because now they're seeing their clubs on university campus becoming outlawed. The only thing that will happen now is that the movements will become more radicalized and more crystallized in their responses to what this is. This is an anti-Jewish war, plain and simple. This is a war against the Jewish people. October 7th was a declaration of war by the radical Islamists of all groups that have splintered from the Muslim Brotherhood to wage war against the Jewish people.
Adam, there's a lot to talk about when we examine the conflict between Palestine and Israel. There's also the historical context that is being brought in by multilateral forums like the UN. We will be delving deep into it. But before that, let me also play out the story in its entirety as these anti-Israeli protesters raided the Makhachkala airport in the Russian Republic of Dagestan. Let's have a quick look.
The Kremlin has blamed the storming of an airport in southern Russia by an anti-Israeli mob on outside influence. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Monday that ill-wishers had used images of suffering in Gaza to inflame tensions in Russia's predominantly Muslim Dagestan region in the North Caucasus, though he did not specify who the Kremlin believed had engineered the violence or why. Hundreds of protesters aimed to disrupt the arrival of a plane from Israel on Sunday, leading to dozens of arrests. Videos obtained by Reuters from the airport showed mostly young men waving Palestinian flags. 20 people were wounded at the airport before security forces contained the unrest, local authorities said. The passengers on the plane were safe, security forces told Reuters. The unrest followed several other anti-Israel incidents in recent days in Russia's North Caucasus region in response to Israel's war against Hamas militants in Gaza. In the wake of the attack, Russian police took control of the airport in regional capital Makhachkala. The Russian Aviation Authority then closed the facility, cancelling all flights until security checks have been completed. Dagestani local government footage released on Monday showed airport officials inspecting the damage and telling regional leaders how protesters threw cobblestones at the facility.
We are working, we are ready. Our equipment is in operational mode. Only the passport control booths sustained some mechanical damage.
Russia's Interior Ministry said it had so far identified 150 of what it called the most active protesters. Regional leaders in two other areas of the Northern Caucasus called for calm. A similar appeal was issued by Dagestan's chief Muslim cleric, or Mufti, while Israel urged Russian authorities to protect Israelis and Jews in their jurisdictions, adding that the Israeli ambassador in Moscow was working with Russian authorities.
Adam, let me come back to when this attack actually happened, when Hamas attacked on October 7th. There's always the very basic question of the failure of intel and law enforcement of a country that is raised. How do you examine the reasons behind the failure to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict and the resulting loss of hope in the Palestinian society now?
How do I resolve it? How do I reconcile it? Well, let's go back to 1948. Then let's go to 57 and 67 and 73, okay, and 82 and 87 and 2000. We have won military campaign after military campaign. Has there been any diplomatic resolution after any of those campaigns? No. We are the only country that has won war after war, but is not actually allowed to finish the victory with some type of diplomatic resolution. One of the things that has constantly split Israel from left to right in terms of politics, not on social issues, okay, on security, which is basically the main cleavage of the Israeli political system until the last 12 years, when social issues really did start to become more relevant in the political arena, okay? It's always been about defining our borders so that we have internationally recognized borders by ourselves, okay? That's why many people were for partitioning the country and many people were for not, because they wanted defensible borders versus a partitioned border. Okay, very, very important. We have never been allowed to have internationally recognized borders for the last 75 years. We have been arguing over everything. The United States recognized the Golan Heights and Jerusalem. Russia recognized West Jerusalem. I mean, it's a in Hebrew we say a balagan, a mess of a lack of diplomatic resolution. And not only that, I want to add to this. Look at how the UN has responded to what has happened. Okay, the UN was established after World War II when they dissolved the League of Nations to prevent this type of global conflict happening because of what happened in World War I and then later what happened in World War II. Okay, but was there really a condemnation against Hamas on October 7th? No, they couldn't even pass it. Okay, this is not about anything other than Gentile hatred of the Jewish people. Okay, and I specifically mean European systemic anti-Semitism, okay, and Arab Islamic extremist, radical, zealous hatred of our nationalism, because what it says to them is that we are more supreme than them because they don't control everything. I think it's just very interesting that the anti-Semitic conspiracy that has gone on for years is that we financially control the world and we control the media. But if you look at the most popular global influencers like Beyonce and Taylor Swift and artists, no, these people who immediately when the Me Too movement happened spoke out. Immediately when Black Lives Matter began, they spoke out. But women have been raped and killed in the streets and had their hands bound and burned, and they say nothing. We just found out that the German tourists that came in from to Israel for the Nova concert, we just found out that she was killed.
Right.
Okay, and you could tell by the video her body was lifeless. I was under the impression she was already dead. And nobody is speaking out against this. Where is the humanity? Where is the moral fiber of the world? They're worried about losing money because they don't know whose side will win. So they're afraid to take sides.
It's a deeply, deeply tragic and deeply horrifying situation, but one that perhaps needs greater contemplation on both ends. Adam, I'm going to request you to continue staying with me, because here what we've witnessed today in the Dagestan airport is also equally significant and crucial in terms of how the world is reacting. And for that, I bring you a Russian reaction where the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said in a statement that Russian President Vladimir Putin has received detailed reports on the situation in the Republic of Dagestan. He said that it is well known and obvious that yesterday's events around the Makhachkala airport are largely the result of outside interference, hinting at a Ukrainian interference.
Putin yesterday evening and this morning received and is receiving detailed reports on the situation in the Republic of Dagestan from the FSB, the Russian National Guard, and from the head of the Republic, Sergei Melikov. It is well known and obvious that yesterday's events around the Makhachkala airport are largely the result of outside interference, including outside information influence. And it is clear that against the backdrop of television footage that shows the horrors happening in the Gaza Strip, the death of the people, children, old people, doctors and others, of course, against the backdrop of this footage, it is very easy for ill-wishers to abuse the situation, provoke it, excite people.
Конечно же, на фоне этих кадров недоброжелателям очень легко злоупотреблять ситуацией, провоцировать ее, возбуждать людей.
Adam continues to stay with us. Adam, let's also talk about how the international community, especially multilateral forums like the United Nations, are reacting. They've raised concerns about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and also highlighted how the conflict is not being viewed from a historical context, with Gazans becoming collateral damage to this war. What are your thoughts?
I think that's fascinating. Let me answer your question with a question. Okay? Explain to me how Israel is committing a humanitarian or creating a humanitarian crisis or waging crimes against humanity against the Palestinian people in Gaza if, one, we did not start this war, Hamas started this war by infiltrating our country and murdering 1,400 people, beheading 40 babies, burning women, raping women, holding families hostage, videotaping it and live streaming it, blowing up parents on top of their children, okay? In addition to that, holding residents of Gaza hostage, blocking their exits to Egypt, and stationing their military encampments underneath hospitals. Explain to me who is creating humanitarian crisis. Here's what I can tell you. Anybody that is throwing a negative narrative on Israel right now, who is saying that Israel is committing any type of war crime, who is committing any type of crime against humanity, is an anti-Semite and is purposely misreading the situation in order to reconcile the fact that they probably have supported Hamas or the pro-Palestinian movements in the past, when in reality, they're totally barbaric. And the majority of the people that are supporting them are the same people that would be slaughtered at the Nova concert. It is complete global hypocrisy, void of any moral fiber or, excuse my language, any balls whatsoever.
All right. We'll also get in a reaction from the communications officer of Palestinian Red Crescent organization, which in a statement has said that there are no means to evacuate the Al-Quds hospital. Remember, the hospital got attacked. And the officer says that over 400 patients are inside this hospital. Many of them are in the intensive care unit, and evacuating them means killing them.
We don't have the means to evacuate Al-Quds hospital. We have over 400 patients who are inside the hospital. Many of them are in the intensive care unit. Evacuating them means killing them. That's why we refuse the evacuation order. We call on the international community to intervene immediately to stop a humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding.
Why are Palestinians unable to dehyphenate between Hamas and Palestine? I understand. I've been listening to you very patiently, and I totally get what Israel is going through, the anger where it's stemming from, and the attack of October 7th that was perpetrated by Hamas, and that is equally the reason why Palestinians need to demarcate between the terrorist organization and the cause for the land of Palestine.
Because the national resistance movement has existed for 75 years to the Palestinian people. It has been steeped in the language of radical Islam for many years. There's a great book by Nels Johnson about Palestinian nationalism and radical Islam. It's about a 45, 65-page book that is written by an anti-Zionist that details the influence of radical Islam and radical Islamic language on the Palestinian national movement. An essential read for anybody wanting to understand this conflict. If you read Rashid Khalidi's The Palestinian Identity, the Creating of a Modern Consciousness, or Migdal and Kimmerling's The Palestinian People, you will understand the importance that Islamic imagery has played in terms of the martyr of the Palestinian people. The very first independent national leader of the Palestinian people was named Haj Amin al-Husseini, who used National Socialistic language in order to galvanize and unite many Palestinian factions to fight the Jews between 1929 and 1948. He was stationed in Berlin. His Bosnian troops were one of the last troops that helped defend Berlin before it collapsed. He was a close friend of Adolf Hitler. I mean, the fact is that if you look at what has happened to the Arab world, okay, since the rise of the Zionist movement, something happened in 1928. Hassan al-Banna started the Muslim Brotherhood, when the State of Israel's Zionist project became successful, the rallying cry call for every single radical Islamic organization was what? One thing: the liberation of Palestine, from Palestinian Islamic Jihad to ISIS, from Hamas to Al-Qaeda. This has been the main recruitment tool for Islamists all over the world. This is their goal.
All right. Adam, I'm going to request you to continue staying with me before I take my last question from you. Important to also highlight and talk about the plight of the Jews and Israelis. Remember, the attack happened on October 7th. There has been no information as far as the hostages are concerned. Only 4 have been released so far. And so people gathered around beds and children's cots set up in a square in Jerusalem to hold a moment of silence for the hundreds of hostages that have been taken by Hamas terrorists in the attacks that took place on October 7th. Hamas, as I mentioned earlier, has only released 4 of these hostages so far and said that 50 have been killed in retaliatory strikes. And, you know, emotions are going to run high, but at the same time, important for Israel to not lose sight of its military strategy, which is why my last question to you. Parallels are now being drawn between Iraq and Gaza, when Iraq's military has been backed by US, Britain, even other special forces, and they took 9 months to drive ISIS out of Mosul back in the year 2017. Can, first of all, Israel borrow from American experience of ground incursions on Gaza, considering there are already reports indicating that it is taking advice from US?
We're receiving US advice. That doesn't mean we're acting on the advice that we get, okay? If you remember 2 weeks ago, even on this station, they were talking about an imminent ground invasion. Everything is being done with patience, okay, and meticulous planning, okay? Nobody is being sent in anywhere that they are unprepared for, which is a very big thing. This is not terrain that the Israeli army is unprepared for, like the Western governments. This is not a colonial project, remember, the Israel project, the Zionist project. This is the national liberation, the returning home, the homecoming of the Jewish people to our national homeland. This is a terrain that we are very familiar with. Now, Gaza is urban warfare, okay? It is very different from Mosul, okay? It is very different from what happened with ISIS, which means that we cannot just go in. Let's put it this way. Israel has some of the greatest military capabilities in the world. We have the strongest air force in the world. And we also have what is in Dimona. Okay, if we wanted to, the Gaza Strip could disappear within 20 minutes. Okay, plain and simple, it could be leveled, it could be bombarded by air for 24 hours straight, and no one would survive. Hamas would be completely eliminated. Tunnels would collapse from above. Okay, and that would be the end of the story. That's not what we're doing. If that was what we were doing, we would be talking about that. But the fact is that this is a very precise military campaign. The other thing that you have to have into play is that this is only one arena of the warfare. The second arena will be in the north, which is going to be a completely different type of open warfare that will not be urban, which is what we're which is probably why we are being so meticulous in what we are doing in Gaza, because this is not the big fight. Hezbollah is the big fight in the north. If this becomes a regional war, and we know that Iran is helping Hamas right now, but if we can cut them off from the Iranians and completely destroy this proxy of Iran, it will allow us to isolate our fighting to the north of the country, because we have Saudi Arabia and Jordan as our buffer for the southern borders, and we have Egypt on the other side as well. So everything has been done very meticulous. And to say that the narrative is being turned, the only people that are turning the narrative are people who don't know their history and don't know their context of a 100-year conflict that is way more than a territorial conflict. Like my friend Shirin Eskela said many times, this is an ideological conflict. This is about the final attempt of radical Islamists to achieve their global eschatological apocalyptic goal to make the world one Islamic state.